I'd like to warmly welcome each and every one of you to the Screen Industry Forum. I see that we have representatives from virtually all arms of the industry today, and that's terrific. In a few short moments, I'll call on our CEO, Brian Lowe, to present some of the ideas that Screen Queensland's management and board have been considering during our process of renewing and revitalising our strategic plan and funding programs. I'm Michael Hawkins, the acting chair of Screen Queensland for the moment. A little bit about me's up there if you're terribly interested. I have just returned from Las Vegas and the annual cinema convention. At that convention we hear from all the studio heads, the Hollywood producers and cinema exhibitors as we all grapple with the issues of the moment. And I can give you the following report. Windows and release patterns still bubble away in the background as an issue of the day. Cinema box office receipts remain at an all-time high. Home entertainment, that's DVDs, rental and sell-through, enjoyed a resurgence in the last 12 months, which has arrested a decline of the last 5 years or so. Everyone walked away from Vegas feeling good about their industry. Everyone walked away from Vegas feeling good to get out of Vegas. And yet another record year is predicted at the box office. Some statistics, however, gave cause to pause. And two of them are these. Film production costs, as an average, have increased by 30% over the last 2 years. And an average Hollywood studio production now costs $90 million, and its P&A is costing $102 million. So that's right, the costs of marketing are now exceeding the costs of actually making it. A couple of points there just to ruminate on. Now, 2012 was an extraordinary year for Screen Queensland. First of all, at the highest level, we got an all-new government. Following that up, we then got an all-new board. We thought we'd take on a new CEO, a new CFO, a new head of culture, and very shortly a new head of business and legal affairs. With all this newness has come a desire to reconsider our own vision.
Thanks, Michael. That's a great introduction, which I'll have to live up to if I can. Well, as you can see, I think the slide has preceded my introduction of myself, so I'll just say that I've been in the business since the 70s, and you know, really my experience has spanned, I think, a little unusual diversity of production, distribution in all media, and finance. So I guess why am I in the business? That isn't my background. My background, I was actually going into brain research of all things from university, but I get a bit bored of being locked away in a lab, the cloistered existence of a researcher, and got into business. And I got into business in the motor industry and the chemicals industry, which was quite stimulating, but the product was so damn boring. I returned to my personal passion, which was being a bit of a tube head and being passionate about film and TV. I thought, okay, well, that's a good business for me. Got some friends who were in it, so I, way back in the late 70s, got into Thames Television, as it was then. So that was my career way back then, and since then, my passion for the industry is undiminished. I guess for me, because the product is of infinite diversity. You know, we can make a TV or film about absolutely anything that we experience in life, and that's, to me, why it's so interesting and why one can never get bored with it, which is my particular motivation. So I've obviously worked for some big companies and some small companies, and myself, some of the names: Granada TV, Virgin, Nine Network, Macquarie Bank in my investment finance manifestation, which was a strange departure. Beyond, I had a joint venture with them, Becker, and then I did a lot of business with Roadshow and Disney, launched a lot of video labels, probably over half the video sell-through business in this country, and I think I was probably the first to sell videos in the UK as well, way back in Oxford Street, trying to sell Brighted Revisited to HMV in Oxford Street, for those of you who like anecdotes. Very bizarre experience. It's about £240 per set, so it just goes to show the passion that the industry generates. So, funded a lot of films over the year. I guess the other thing, apart from video sell-through, that I've been particularly involved in, which I'd like to think is relevant to where we are today, because I think that the advertising-driven model of television and entertainment consumption clearly has transformed itself into a pay-per-view model where we have choice and control. So video is just like that. You had to pay to watch it. Walker, who has been the Minister since February, is the member for Mansfield. He has a very broad, broad brief across science, information, technology, innovation, and the arts. He obviously is the person who interprets and drives the LNP policy of Arts for All Queenslanders, which I think reflects the desire to spread the arts and broad, both in all areas, metropolitan and regionally. I think no better sector than in film and television, which is clearly addresses all Queenslanders. That policy is in draft and will be released in 2014. And the headlines, as you can see on the slide, are to develop a strong arts community, growth in more partnerships and investment, which I think is a prevailing theme of this government and Screen Queensland, and public value. As I said, if we don't get value for taxpayer dollars, then we have to start getting a little nervous as to whether that funding will grow and be sustained. So not that that's on the cards, but we have to clearly deliver value. And Queensland being recognised as a cultural hub, and that is connected to a broader strategy to drive tourism and the substantial growth of tourism over the next few years. I just want to mention that this subject of government is always a kind of knee-jerk, gosh, is the government's assistance going to be cut back? Well, last, whenever it was, October, November, there was no cutback to Screen Queensland, despite cutbacks elsewhere. Both the Premier and the Minister are passionate personal advocates of the arts. Those fears are quite understandable, but they're not founded in any fact or substance. The Minister himself has a personal passion for the arts, indeed, and I think the Premier's daughter, from what I know, is also studying television, I believe. So we're not considered some strange beasts within government at all. We have their absolute support. So I'd like to move on to the numbers, which... there we go. Just a little bit of a retrospective, just kind of where we're coming from. I think it's kind of helpful just to kind of have a bit of an overview, because it's worth stopping sometimes and just looking at what our achievements are and where we are right at this moment as a foundation for going forward. Some of these are kind of give you a bit of a ballpark on where we are. The $104 million of Queensland production expenditure was for 2012. We estimate that created 3,800 jobs. If you believe the ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, that delivers about a 1.8 leverage in economic value. So that's almost 200 million in total economic benefit. So these are some of the arguments that we discuss, and some of the things we discuss when we're talking to our government colleagues. Year to date for us is a little bit lower this year, and obviously we've all been, well, the foreign production sector, footloose production, has been clobbered by the Aussie dollar, to state the obvious. Year to date we're at about 55 million for this financial year. We have this financial year about $7.5 million in our funding programs. We also have from Queensland Treasury Corporation in the Revolving Film Finance Fund, or the RFFF, we have a $20 million credit line, which we draw on to, which I'll be coming on to later. So that's a great facility, and something where there's usually plenty of capacity for cash flow. This year we'll be running about 30 industry networking events. I'll be coming on to networking later, and Jenny will be saying a little bit about that, which are spread right across Queensland, obviously mainly southeast Queensland, from the Gold Coast to Brisbane to FNQ. Last November saw the 21st anniversary of BIF, which was a terrific event. It screened 130, in fact, some of it in this venue. 136 features, 66 short films, 3 world premieres, 43 Aussie premieres, and of course I'd like to mention the Gold Coast Film Festival, which I went to last week, it kicked off to a terrific opening, obviously teamed up with Supernova. It was pretty star-studded. I managed to rub shoulders with a gigantic Flash Gordon in the lift, which I was pretty impressed by. Quite a nice guy, actually. I felt like breaking into the Queen song, but I didn't. You'd be pleased to hear. So that was a terrific event, organised down there, and great attendance. We've got our 9th year of CineSparks last year. We're going to rebrand that Biff Gen Next. That's aimed at students, and I think it's very important for us to address the kind of, the next generation of filmmakers and get them early, as they say. I don't think they need any persuasion, but anyway. Last year we also support regional screen culture events, and the amount for that is about 160,000 going out to regional screen culture events. Moving on to, that was the numbers. The little bit of a, obviously we see these names and headlines coming up all the time in our dealings daily, but just for the benefit of those of you who don't perhaps have an overview, I just wanted to run through some of the projects that Queensland were primarily responsible for over the last 12 months. Not in any order at all, and apologies to those of you who feel you've been unfairly excluded from this Hall of Fame. Bait 3D didn't do that well in Australia, but my God, it did really well in China. When gangbusters over there. It broke some sort of foreign box office record for a foreign film. We're not quite clear what the record was, but it was claimed that it was like at 35 million box office in China, it broke some sort of record for a non-Chinese film. Strange Calls was, I think, particularly interesting from an industry and business model perspective, because from Hoodlum, it was a, as some of you will know, an innovative sort of, I don't know, TV, comic crime thriller with online Twitter kind of twists. What's interesting to me, and I think the industry, is that it was picked up as a US format by the ABC network in the US, even before it aired on ABC2 here, which I think is really, just indicates that we are being watched. We're not, there's a tyranny of distance, but people are really in touch with what we're doing in Australia and have a very high regard for Australia and Queensland's professional skills. So I think that gives substance to that statement. Once Upon a Time in Cabramatta from Northern Pictures, as you know, gritty, multi-award winning, factual, now gone into Once Upon a Time in Punchbowl, somewhere I'm very happy not to be driving through too often, having moved from Sydney. Abba Blanga Boomerang, Larry had to mention that, maybe we'll be screening it later. Terrific, a favourite of mine, and obviously a favourite of a lot of people because it got 1.4 million viewers and...
2 million.
Was it?
Yes.
God, you were robbed. Okay, sorry about that. That was what was interesting, I think, Larry, was the fact that I think it got the fastest ever repeat on ABC, which was kind of catch-up TV before catch-up TV, so that was kind of interesting, I think. Mental, feature that reunited the good old team of PJ Hogan and Tony Collette. Coming up, there's a tremendous diversity here, I think, which is really encouraging and exciting. Predestination, when I was a lad I used to read a lot of sci-fi, and one of my favourites was Robert Heinlein. This is actually a Robert Heinlein short story, and this one's been adapted by the Sperry brothers, and Paddy MacDonald and forgive me, I've just gone blank for a moment. Tim McGuy, so sorry about that, Tim. Starring Ethan Hawke. It's been pre-sold to Sony for a large part of the world. Really exciting film. Mako Island of Secrets from the TV franchise phenomenon Jonathan Schiff. That's now gone to a second series with ZDF and 10. The Railway Man, a UK-Aussie co-pro from Chris Brown, starring Colin Firth and Nicole Kidman. I think I've seen the film. It's a fantastic film, very powerful film. Involving a sort of reconciliation between a prisoner of war and a Japanese camp commander. Very powerful. That's I think, going to do really well, and great value as a co-pro to have a cast like that. Reef Doctors, another, I think the first kind of TV drama for adult audiences from Jonathan Schiff, starring Lisa McCune. Mystery Road, a great thriller movie, interestingly shot largely in Winton, which is really interesting. We're talking about regional spend later. Starring Aaron Peterson and Hugo Weaving and Jack Thompson. My Mistress, coming of age, rather risque feature, starring a big French star, Emmanuel Béard. The good old favourite Patrick, being remade by Tony Jannane from the 70s classic, starring Rachel Griffiths. So, just mention Footloose movies because they do form a very important part of our industry here and give us spend, critical mass, infrastructure, sustainability. Disney's 20,000 Leagues is hardly a secret anymore. It's been now been announced by federal government. We're hoping to get a slice of that production. We don't know how much in Queensland. Seahawk, rumoured to star Hugh Jackman again, is another big one. There's an awful lot of others in the LA and the world industry are circling because they're all hoping that the location offset will increase from 16.5% to 30%, and we're obviously on Queensland's behalf and with the cause of trying to create this critical mass here, trying to get as much of that as we possibly can. I mean, the interesting thing is, for me, coming to Queensland, is that Queensland does have this, I think, you know, unrivaled and largest track record in footloose production going back to the 80s. And I think that's it, you know, it's recognised an enormous balance sheet of skills around the world. When you go into LA, you talk to studio bosses, they know exactly how good the industry is in Queensland. And that can translate, yeah, to more footloose production, but to the local industry, it's the same people, a lot of the, you know, so it's worth remembering just how highly regarded we are internationally. So, moving on to our sort of business plan type of parts. Where are we coming from, where are we going? Our mission statement is very noble, but I won't read it out because I'm sure you can read it for yourself. Basically, as Michael has said, we have a new government, a new board and a new CEO. What we are trying to do is to refresh our strategy to rejuvenate and energise the Queensland screen industry with you. You know, we're just part of, we're actually serving the practitioners. We can't do it, we're just, you know, people who have a sum of money to try and be the catalyst for that. But it's really down to the screen industry, and that we have to offer some direction and guidance on that, and that's what we're trying to do. But obviously what we're all about is growth, you know, the usual stuff, growth, sustainability. As Michael emphasised, local and global audiences. I just wanted to digress slightly there and say, following on from Michael's comments, about 23 million people. You know, in the independent film industry, you know, the reckoning is that Australian rights are worth 3 to 5%, say 4% of the world market. So if you're selling a $10 million film pre-selling, then you might estimate you're going to get about 400,000 for Aussie rights as a pre-sale. So we're a relatively small part, a significant market, but still a relatively small market. So obviously similar arithmetic applies to television. I appreciate the dynamics are completely different, but nevertheless, it's worth remembering that, you know, not always, but often we must have an eye on global audiences. And that's all part of a market-driven approach to foster commercial success and revenue returns. Revenue returns aren't just there for sort of, you know, the soundbite. They're really there because if we can generate some revenue returns, then we increase the investment pool for future production. We build confidence. This business, as you all know, is all about confidence. You know, to get a TV or film project over the line is about convincing a lot of people who are initially hostile and not really interested in yawning at you to be interested, and that's all about building confidence. So we're just the same. We have to convince our political colleagues that we're business-like, we're working in a methodical way, we have an eye on the business as well as the passion we all share for the content. Bigger things is that in terms of trade issue, where there's a small production investment under $50,000, it'll be a grant rather than equity investment. You know, just in terms of the legals and documentation, it's a more expeditious way to go. It's something that other states have adopted. I think it makes sense. I think I mentioned already about short form again in development. I'll mention it again. That also applies to production investment and reflects the changing pattern of content production and broadcast and distribution. I've mentioned that production attachments, where there's an investment over $100,000, there will be a scale of production attachments that will be required as a condition of that production investment. Not in an onerous way, but in a way that reflects, hey, you know, you've got a large sum of money from the government, and it's reasonable to kind of tag on some professional attachments in a proper way. There's no distinction going forward in the funding cap between film, TV, or factual, which was a little twist on the old terms. What's out? Again, coming back to the bad news, you know, or not, to pay for the new initiatives. The low budget feature film initiative was a trial program that was run this year, aimed at $1.5 million movies. You know, we're hopeful that we're going to be able to make at least one movie out of that scheme. We're just in discussion with the marketplace, with the Problem is, one is still in discussion with the marketplace at any budget level, certainly 1.5 million. We really endorse the spirit behind that, and I'll be talking in a moment about the spirit behind that being trying to foster the emergence and entry of new filmmakers, theatrical filmmakers into the industry. And we've actually now looking at replacing that with a micro-budget movies program, which I'll be moving on to in a moment. The digital media projects, that's not out really, it's really been built into something bigger and better, which is the multi-platform and games fund. So I'll be coming on to that later as well. So moving swiftly on to the micro-budget movies. As I've said, entry level. That doesn't necessarily mean young, but it may well mean people straight from film school. I think there is a little bit of it. I think we do have in the film business a little bit of a generational problem, and I refer back to Michael's earlier comment that production costs are ever escalating, and you know, it's hard for a new filmmaker to make a film. And I think this idea arose out of I think something that we often talk about down the pub, but we never kind of act on, which is, you know, why can't we make Paranormal Activity or Blair Witch or whatever? And I think we all recognise that for every Paranormal Activity, there's probably another 200 credit card movies that we've never heard of. But nonetheless, this kind of democracy of making really, really low-budget films is something that really does foster the emergence of new talent, because there is a bit of a film club, we can't help it, you know, and if you're not in the club, it's pretty tough, so how do you get in the club? So there's something of that behind this scheme as well. So we kind of scratched our heads and thought about how we could make this thing work, and hopefully we'll be talking about this in the Q&A as well, but I'll just give you our pitch of what the scheme is, and then we'll talk about it later perhaps. It's really to support, it's to provide mentoring, and it's to provide support right through the whole process. And because we only have a limited amount of money, the problem with a low budget scheme is we couldn't afford to fully fund you know, a $1.5 million film, or it would have taken too much money away from other programs. So the question is, how much can a budget be to allow us to fully fund that film, to 100% equity funded? A few years ago, AFC had a scheme called IndieVision, which was you know, bigger budgets because they had more dough. We don't have their money. So we looked at the, I guess, prevailing thinking and the fact that Screen Australia had dropped the QUAPE level, minimum QUAPE, down to 500,000. And guess what? We've grossed it up to budgets of between 550 and 600,000 by not very high finance practice. That's pretty much the budget we're shooting for. And we'd be able to fully fund one project a year. We'd like to do more, and if we can carve out some more money, maybe we can, but we're saying one project a year. So then we're thinking, well, that's only one project a year. How can we deliver more value for that scheme if it's only going to one project? And there we believe that if we incorporate the process as you know, we go through the whole movie making process from pitch through to writing, through to production, through to release, then I think that will kind of really, in the earlier stages, which will be, is intended to start with a speed pitching contest where kind of 25 words or less, you know, people go to a live event, give us your pitch. Maybe it's not 25 words, maybe it's 3 minutes, I don't know. But it really gets everybody involved. It really illustrates and focuses the mind on why your filming idea is any good. It's really hard to pitch. I mean, we all pitch. You know, wherever we're in a business meeting, if I'm talking about someone else's project, I have to pitch your projects to, you know, some party overseas or whatever. Then I have to be able to pitch that, and it's really hard, you know, to what is going to appeal to that person. You know, what is the hook? How do I grab their attention? You know. That's a real discipline, and I think there isn't enough focus on pitching, and I think this scheme is one of the ways in which we can focus on pitching and the discipline of pitching to really understand what the key story elements are, what the key thematic elements are, what the key marketing hooks are for your idea. And from the idea, we then fund, okay, well, they were the best, I don't know what, 25 pitches, might be quite a lot, or 10 pitches, we haven't quite figured out the numbers. We'll give you a small amount of money to go and develop the treatment. And then we'll whittle it down like your favourite TV talent show. We'll whittle down to, or your most hated TV talent show, as the case may be. We'll whittle down through the process of pitch, to treatment, to first draft, to polished draft. the final winner of the final sum of money to make the film. And when the film is made, you'll be aware that there are issues surrounding getting a 40% offset for tax reasons, and there has to be a bona fide theatrical intent. And we're looking at ways in which we can assist in the release and management of that release to ensure that we don't run into problems with that 40% offset, because we need the 40% to pay for the scheme. So it's something new, and I welcome discussion and ideas on that in the Q&A. How are we going on time, Amy? We're pretty much on it, right? Sorry. See, it really is supposed to take this long, sorry about that. The Multi-Platform and Games Fund, which again, I say substantially a new program because there was recognition up to, I think, 10,000, a certain amount in the past, but it wasn't considered adequate given the changing environment, and also given the major initiative by Screen Australia to offer this $20 million digital fund to games and multi-platform content. So I think we're responding to that, not just to that, but to the underlying market trends that have driven that. So it can cover games, it can cover any form of multi-platform content that is produced primarily for multi-platform exploitation. So it doesn't apply if you've got a film or a TV project and you want to promote it online. That is not covered, because that's promotion of your content that was made for another primary medium. And it's obviously to try and foster and promote sustainable digital content production industry. It also covers games, and there's a different model surrounding games. A lot of different business models here, and there's a real focus on groundbreaking projects that have really understand what their market is and have a plan, a business plan around that. I mean, the games plan is geared to games distribution, quite clearly, publishing and distribution. Obviously, short-form content and multi-platform is geared towards how you're going to monetize that. It's easy to make short-form content, and monetizing the stuff is really hard, and that's obviously a work in progress for the industry. It's changing, but it's still immature, that sector. We're going to be offering early stage development funding up to $10,000, which may require, again at our discretion, depending on the nature of the proposal, some sort of marketplace endorsement. For later stage, we'd be offering a larger sum up to $40,000, which would require certainly marketplace endorsement and a monetization plan, which is based on that. Again, prevailing theme will give priority to applications where there is some matched money, which again is an indication that other people apart from us, we're not sort of the self-appointed sole geniuses in this, you know, as you probably noticed. You know, we really want to hear what private parties have to say about multi-platform games propositions. So that's another, I'd like to call it a substantially a new scheme. As I've said, if we're in a relationship business, then we're in serious trouble if we don't network. But I guess sometimes we don't network and collaborate as much as we should or could. And I think we have a role as Screen Queensland because we've got the dough, people are going to pay attention to it. It's very unfair. And therefore we can actually trigger, you know, people to come and talk to us in Queensland about what's happening in their neck of the woods, be it in broadcast or in their companies. So we're trying to leverage that clout, if you like, that we have, and we're trying to build on these regular series of Screen Queensland events to connect us, the industry, to key commissioning parties, experts, and industry deal makers. I mean, you know, you've got a great project, you've got a great idea, it's not worth diddly if you can't get in front of the people. You know, you've got to get in front of people, you've got to have access, and that's the cruelty of our business, that sometimes the best projects don't have access. That's the never put your daughter on the stage scenario. It's a very unfair business. What we've got coming up immediately, down to a little bit of networking that Jenny and myself, I'll throw to Jenny in a moment, have been doing. And Jenny's driven this one with SBS, where she's been schmoozing and grooving down there, and has got them to come up to Queensland, I think pushing an open door. They're very eager to do a national roadshow. And we're looking at putting together a panel in June for that. I'm just giving you a little bit of a teaser on what we're doing. Again, interactive interactive and multi-platform I mentioned a moment ago, but given the new Screen Australia Interactive Games Fund, the 20 mil, we really need to understand how that works, and to facilitate that we've got Screen Oz investment managers Mike Cowart and Justin Halliday coming up in June, sometime in June, to again talk to us about that. And I'll just throw briefly now to Jenny, if I may, because Jenny, you've probably got a better knowledge of this than I have.
Yeah, I'll just give you an update on some of the other guests that we've got coming up. It's pretty exciting. Everyone we've approached has really expressed a great interest in coming to Queensland, so I think that's really incredibly positive. But some of the other, just going back to SBS, I mean, what we're trying to get from SBS are all the commissioning editors, so as many as we can, and also some of the channel managers, and that includes NITV, and also Chris Keeley, who's the general manager of their subscription television channel Studio and World Movies. We're also looking to get Leon Conningham, who's heading up their distribution side, to try and get a broad cross-section of what SBS does. We're also approaching ABC to do a similar presentation in Queensland. And we'll be approaching, of course, Richard Finlayson, who's actually going from SBS to head up the director, or take up the role as Director of Television at ABC. So it'll be interesting to see what direction he sees the ABC going. In other areas, we've also approached some really great speakers for our In Conversation With segment, and that includes Marianne Carroll, who's Executive Producer of Comedy at the Seven Network. Comedy is one of the hardest genres that you can ever be successful in, and it'll be really interesting to hear what Marianne has to say and to give us some tips on where Seven is going in the comedy genre. Jason Stevens, Creative Director of Fremantle Media. Jason was responsible for Killing Time and The King, and it will be really interesting to see how he works with also Fremantle in the international stage as well, and how we can bring that international distribution side of Fremantle into the production side. Seth McKenna, of course, from Head of Australian Production from Roadshow Films, and Andrew Mackey from Transmission, and Chris Oliver-Taylor from Matchbox Pictures, who are doing such great things in factual, drama and feature film as well. We're also going to be doing sessions on working with Foxtel, who put quite a significant amount of money into Australian productions, and that can span factual and documentary, drama, and also with their new movie division now, which has taken over from Showtime and Movie Network. So it will be interesting to hear what they have to say and what kind of investment they're putting into Australian productions. Some of the other topics that we're going to cover over the next, I'd say, 6 to 12 months will be the changing broadcast environment. So that's really changing right now with IPTV and many of those different kind of platforms that are coming up, and it's changing rapidly. We're also looking at the international market, what's in and what's out. We really need to find out what's working over there, how, what kind of tips we can get from those big international sales agents, especially in that broadcast environment with people such as Endemol and beyond. Partnerships and funding, including philanthropic funding, really important to look at new sources of finance and how we can tap into that. And also theatrical and festivals. I'd like to really interrogate how we can utilise festivals much more international and local to really elevate our theatrical releases. So they're just some of the ideas that we've got coming up. Of course, we've got State of the Markets, so we'd like to hear back from all of our filmmakers that attend the markets and to get an insight into what's happening as well, and just market intelligence. And of course, when we visit those markets as well, we'll be doing presentations. So hopefully to gain some good information that will assist you in your endeavours. Thanks.
Thanks, Jenny. So that's something that, as I say, we have under Jenny's guidance and ferocious marketing skills, have a real focus on trying to network our industry interstate and globally. And get us in the faces of people and keep production in Queensland from a local producer standpoint, attract production to Queensland from an interstate standpoint with collaboration with local screen practitioners. So it's a good facility, it's a great facility. And obviously it cash flows primarily producer offset, distribution guarantee, pre-sales, or as we say, any other collateral security that is acceptable to Screen Queensland. What that means is that it's very hard for us to cash flow, an LA or a London DG, because A, it's very hard for us to gauge the creditworthiness of Joe Blogg's sales. It's different if it's Lionsgate or Sony or something, but it's hard if it's an indie sales company because they come and go, as you know. or depending, and we look at case by case, we look at the creditworthiness. Often it's difficult, and then if we have a problem, if we have to litigate in LA or London or somewhere else in the world, it's not viable. We're not equipped to do that. We can't afford to do that, which is why it's sometimes excluded. But there are other commercial lenders out there who, if those people are creditworthy, they will cash flow the paper. It's the RFFF funds a maximum of $4 million per project, or 50% of the total budget. It's any production company maximum 66 mil out at any one time. And as ever, the rates and the pricing, the fees are under constant review to ensure that we remain consistent with other providers and position our facility appropriately. Just let me explain though, sometimes that we kind of got a completely different hat on this page, because people think, well, we're a public body, you know, we put out investments, you just look at the books, we basically lose nearly all our money. And we're Taylor and Charlie in the deals, we're the last person to get our money back, which is why we exist. That's not a complaint, that's the reason we exist, to subsidise and facilitate private money in a funding jigsaw. But with RFFF, it's completely different. We are a bank. You know, we have to get our money back. We have to get our money back. So the way we deal with the debt in the RFFF is completely different in terms of documentation, and in business practice we become much more hard-nosed, so apologies if we do sometimes. The reason we do is because if someone defaults on a couple of $1 million loan, then guess who pays? You guys. You guys pay. Because we just have to take $2 million out of our programs to pay off Queensland Treasury. So that's why we have to be tough. So I just wanted to explain that, because we have a few hats on in Screen Queensland. That's one of our hats. Okay. Over the page. This is one that we're quite excited about, and we hope you will, you know, endorse the logic behind it. I know many of you said, give us a bit of working capital, please, which I've said myself to people on many occasions. It's an enterprise program. It's obviously, you know, follows what's widely regarded as Screen Australia's success with their enterprise program, which admittedly been more successful on the TV side than the film side. Probably because the TV model is a bit more predictable than the film model. But it's aimed at Queensland or interstate companies who have the ability to stimulate the Queensland industry in any combination of film, TV or multi-platform production. It's to foster the establishment of viable screen business in Queensland. I'm kind of reading this a little bit roads because I want to emphasise that it's flexible, local and interstate, but the benefit has to be Queensland. Where was I up to? It also incorporates the professional development angle that we've talked about already. It has to create sustainability. It's not just dip in, grab the money and see you later. It's got to generate a longer term benefit, as evidenced in the business plan that's part of the application. Preference is given to applicants presenting credible revenue returns. Obviously, this is in the manner of venture capital. So obviously, as a venture capitalist, we look at what's the revenue return. We want to get, you know, this money back. If we get this money back, then we can churn it and get more money out to either you or other people who are applying for essentially working capital enterprise funding. So those who can demonstrate a keen appreciation of market realities, business practices, both domestically and internationally, are going to be the people who are going to have a better chance of accessing this funding. Now, historically, there was a business development grant of about $10,000, which is really to help you kind of write your business plan. We're now offering either an investment or a grant, depending on various factors, of up to $150,000 per applicant. So that's the maximum amount. Don't assume that's the amount that we would give you. That's the maximum amount. And it's basically to drive business enterprise development for Queensland companies, to allow interstate companies to establish a production base in Queensland, but in collaboration with Queensland practitioners. The applicants may seek to match or link external funding from other sources, or private, public or private. So for instance, you might get money from Screen Australia and put it alongside money we could give you, for example. It's to cover, as I've said, obviously working capital as part of a business plan. The recoupment and participation terms will be in the kind of the model and method of venture capital, but they'll be negotiated. They'll be spread across a range of business activities over an agreed period. So if you like, in terms of toughness, it's somewhere between the debt funding of the RFFF, where we have to get 100% back, and the investment where we often say goodbye to the money completely or largely. This is really in the middle. We're looking for a pretty good return, as the best return we can get. That is the new enterprise program. Again, invite questions in the Q&A. So finally, the production incentive program, which may or may not affect you directly, but I'll just quickly zip through it. It's obviously available to international and interstate companies. It develops, considerable benefits of developing the industry, critical mass, employment, jobs, industry upskilling, cultural benefits, sustainable infrastructure. They're grants, they're not investments. They cover location scouting. They cover the Queensland payroll tax rebate, which is 4.5% payroll. That is uncapped. There is a minimum of 3.5 million spend to access that for payroll tax. And it's not for people who've received production investment. It's kind of either or. So it's a slightly different type of scheme. Often it is used to attract interstate production. But we believe that if we can attract substantial companies who are based in the southern states to Queensland, then we think that gives you another business partner, another collaboration, another place to go. Maybe people who have better access to some of those key deal makers. Maybe that's always frustrating. You don't want to have a middleman there, but sometimes that's necessary to get to the next project where maybe you don't need a middleman. So that's the logic. What's new? Well, this is kind of new, which is why it's a couple of new things. One is the reduction of the minimum spend from 15 mil to 3.5 million to make it in line with other states and to stimulate, to get to critical mass to come and stimulate these opportunities more easily. And the other new area is what we're calling the regional statewide incentive grants. Bit of a mouthful. Basically, it's to stimulate and support production outside of southeast Queensland. So if you're in Townsville or Cairns or Winton, it's pretty tough because, if you're at production base in the Gold Coast or Brisbane, then it's very expensive, as we all know, to produce in those remote centres. There are additional travel, accommodation, allowance costs. This directly addresses that and, compensates and motivates the production company and the producer to consider those remote centres and obviously to build production activity in regional centres around Queensland, which, as you've probably noticed, is obviously part of a very noble sort of effort on the part of the Queensland government to try and develop those regional centres. And obviously we also, I think, will stimulate new talent coming from those regional centres by indirectly over a period of time. It obviously works alongside the Shire Council Film Friendly Pathways Programme, which we launched in 2010, and it obviously competes with what Victoria and New South Wales are offering too. So it puts us on a more equal footing, and we're a very big state. So finally, again, on-screen culture. Again, it may not affect you directly, but I just wanted to give you a complete picture of what we do. Obviously, the usual bylines to engage and inform, to try and create an awareness of film, culture, the theatrical experience, the social side of film, as well as the breadth of product that is out there in the world, a very broad range. It covers, obviously, our activities at BIF cover very broad-ranging product from mainstream to very niche cinefilm films. We also give out grants, which is probably more relevant. As I mentioned earlier, we give out about $160,000 a year to regional applicants who run their own screen culture events in various parts of Queensland for film festivals and screenings, public events, and visits by leading filmmakers, etc. So that's just a little bit of a final epilogue to our activities to round it off. And at this point, I will, having gone on for a very long period of time, I will throw back to Michael to just take over proceedings briefly and go on to the next stage.